Hello, here I am again. How are you? I want to do a video today on a very difficult subject, but I think we need to talk about it. I know it's hard to mention the word anti-Semitism or Jew or Holocaust or anything like that. We're not supposed to say anything about it, and yet it's time that we do talk about it because of the heated situation that we're in. You know, I'm German. Some of you may know. And I can say that I worked through my guilt, my Holocaust guilt. And I had to work through it. I had to deal with my guilt of what happened in my country, home country, during the Third Reich. And so I had to really think a lot. I went through a lot of stages, grieving stages. And that's why this topic is very important for me. Yes, I can go by saying, and I very strongly believe in never again. Yes, never again should what happened in Germany with the Jews and whatever happened happen with any other group. And there's the difference maybe between many people and me. Many just think about, oh, the Holocaust should never happen again for the Jews, but no, Holocaust should not happen anymore with any other group. And I'm talking about Holocaust, I'm talking about the genocide of a group of people. Holocaust happened, you know, if you talk about Holocaust, I don't know what's the definition is about, you know, burning of people. I think that but it kind of goes back. But there was a German Holocaust happening at the end of the Second World War as well. Germans were burned alive. They were not gassed before. They were burned alive. And nobody talks about that one. But we need to. We should. I have actually brought it up. The bombing of German cities 80 years ago. Human beings are cruel, very cruel. And it doesn't matter what people group we're talking about. We're all extremely cruel. And the worst part is that we as a mass allow ourselves to be pulled into these cruel acts. We don't think. We act like sheep. We act like blind cattle. We allow ourselves to be brainwashed, controlled, manipulated to perform the cruelties, even amongst our own kind. And people, please make no mistakes. We are human beings, foremost. Yeah, Satan can think that he can split humankind in different groups, you know, and so that we can fight each other. See, this is what he does. Oh, here, look at this group over here, and they have long noses, and so we're gonna fight them. Oh, look over here, this group, oh, they're tyrants. And they kill their own people, they gas their own people, and so now we can fight them, whether it's true or not. How do we know what another person does in another foreign country? Oh, we follow media. Media should know it. No, they don't know. These things have always been done against every group of people. If you do the research, this fear-mongering and this making the other people look bad so we can war against them has always happened. It happened during the First World War. The British people were brainwashed and make believe that the Germans were bad during the First World War. And the Americans, they did the same thing to the Americans. During the Second World War, they did the same thing with the Americans again. Oh my goodness, these people are so bad, and we have to make them look bad in order for our, politicians to start a war with them. Today we do the same thing. Oh, Putin is such a horrible person, and we have to war against him. Oh, now it's Iran. Oh my goodness, Iran is so bad. Or look what Israel is doing. Listen to what Netanyahu is saying. Oh, Hamas. Oh, we're going to create this whole group of Hamas so we can war against all the Palestinians because we want to get rid of them, right? They're monsters. And what do they even use? They use the Bible. They have used the Bible for thousands of years to destroy people. What did they do with the Crusades? They used the Bible in the name of Jesus to kill people. Okay, what did they do when they went over to South America or the Americans? They used the Bible to destroy the Indians over there. Has always happened, people. In the name of Christ, we are going to defeat everybody. And if they're not bowing down, and of course it was always bowing down to who? The Pope. But I want to really talk about the Jews today. Because a lot of people are screaming Jews again. And of course there's a difference between the Jews and the Israeli. What are Israelis? Israelis are people that are citizens of Israel. Now, why can they also be Jews? Well, what is a Jew? Is a Jew somebody who can trace themselves back to the tribe of Judah? Can they? I hope you all know the story. If you want to talk about and scream about Jews and Zionism and anti-Semitism and blah, 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 shouldn't we know the definitions? Shouldn't we know historically what we are even talking about? Of course, today we only see, Jews, they have this strange religion, and Jews over there in Israel. But there's a difference, people. There's a difference. And then we have a whole group of people called Christian Zionists, or let's say Christians, that believe that, oh my goodness, God gave the land over there, the promised land, to the Jews. Yeah, they're being brainwashed to believe that. It's a mess. It's a real mess. And what does Trump want? He wants to silence the whole mess so the mess will continue. That's what Trump is trying to do. And people are screaming on the internet, making things even worse, and they still don't know what's really going on. People, if you have been following my videos, you should know a little bit. I think I even have a playlist. If you go to the playlist, I do have a playlist. Hello, my Lieben. Sorry, that's not what I wanted. I'm trying to go to the playlist. Yeah, what playlist should you... Israel of God is one of them that you could look at. And I think that's it. But I have made a lot of videos on this topic. But I want to define some of the words today, which I think is very important. Now, first, let's look at what a biological Jew is, if there is even. So in order to do that, we have to go back in history. We need to understand history, Jewish history, or let's say Hebrew history. Hopefully all of you know about Abraham. Abraham had a grandson named Jacob. First he had a son, Isaac. Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. God chose Jacob, not Esau, because Esau would not follow him. Jacob was then called Israel. Israel, of course, where they got the name from. Israel, what we have today, is the land of Israel, but it has really nothing to do with Israel. Well, some. But anyways, that's where that name Israel comes from. That's where we all have the Israel of God from. Israel was the man of God because he followed him. Esau didn't follow God. That's why God didn't choose him. Israel followed God. So therefore he became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. 12 tribes of Israel were 12 sons of Israel from 4 women. Not 2, 4. There was Rachel and there was Leah. And Leah and Rachel each had a maid. And Jacob even had children with the maids. So 4 women. So the 12 sons were from 4 women. One of those sons was Judah. And Judah was promised that from him Messiah would come. And that's why he was so important. He wasn't important because he was better than the other ones. Matter of fact, Joseph was actually more enlightened by God than Judah. Joseph was the one they wanted to kill him, and they sold him into slavery to Egypt. And he became Pharaoh's right-hand man. But Judah wasn't that important, but it was prophesied that from him would come the Messiah. So yes, they knew it. All tribes knew that from Judah the king would come, which also was Messiah. But of course, they all forgot. Most of them forgot. So then these 12 tribes would go into Egypt and would become slaves. And God, of course, had to bring them back because of Messiah, not because of them. So he brought them back, and guess what? They continued to idol worship, and he wanted to destroy them, and Moses asked God to please not do that. So they came into the promised land, but under only the condition that they would keep God's commandment. God said, if you do not keep the commandments, I will kick you out. I will kick you out. Well, of course they didn't, right? We know that. They kept going back to idol worship, to not following God's commandments. And God had to bring in judges to judge them, to put them back on the right track. And God said, well, I give you another chance, I give you another chance. Then they screamed, we want a king. And so God gave them a king. And he said, well, these kings are going to not do very well for you. And so it was. They had Saul, and then they had David. David was good. But then Solomon really oppressed them. And so 10 tribes after Solomon split off and said, we are not going to be under Judah anymore, under the rule of Judah. So they split the kingdom. One was the southern kingdom with Judah, and only one tribe stayed with Judah, and that was Benjamin. That became Judah, the kingdom of Judah. The other was the kingdom of Israel. Israel continued to whore around with idols. They did not follow God. And so very soon, God divorced them and sent them away. 10 tribes were sent into disbursement. They were dispersed all over the kingdom, the existing kingdom, never to return again. People, they didn't return again. They mixed with all the other, kingdoms and people groups. So, which we call Gentiles. They didn't return. Judah lasted a little longer because the kings there kept trying to go or led the people back to God once in a while. So it took them a little longer to be, God said, I had enough. Okay, and that was Judah and Benjamin. Finally, God had enough and kicked them out, and they were sent in Babylonian captivity. And in Babylonian captivity, we know about Daniel. Daniel begging God that he would not give up on them. So God promised that they will have 490 years for Messiah to come. Because the Messiah came out of, Judah. That was the Messiah, that was the Savior, that was God who would rescue them. And they knew it because the prophets told them. But of course, what happened in Babylonian captivity? They didn't have, the temple and the rituals and stuff. And so they created their own religion. Judah did. So when they came back, finally, they were promised to come back to Judah. They didn't own it. They just were promised to come back under the Persians. They had already created a religion, and even during the time when they were living in the land under the Persians and then the Greek, they continued their religion. And when Jesus came, they made a mess. They made a mess of the instructions of Moses and the prophets. And that's why they rejected Messiah, because their leaders messed everything up. They did not wait for this Messiah that would rescue them, but they were waiting for a Messiah that would free them from their enemies. So they were all messed up. So during that time, during Jesus' time, you could still distinguish who was a Jew by birth, by biological, by genes. They knew it. They had their genealogy. They had their genealogy. They knew who they came from. That's what we have with Jesus. We know exactly who Jesus came from. They kept track record very well. So they knew, Jesus came from Judah, exactly from who David, from Nathan, not from Solomon. We have two genealogies. We have one that traces Jesus back through Joseph, which is not the correct genealogy, that goes through to Solomon and then David and then Judah. That's not the correct one, even though by adoption he had the right to Solomon, so be king. But he didn't have the right to be Messiah. Only through Mary and Nathan, one of the sons of David. You can see those genealogies. But after they rejected Jesus, God made sure that the old covenant was gone, that the temple was gone. So he had Jerusalem destroyed. He had them dispersed again. Actually, he had them all killed. Most of them were killed. You see that in the writings of Josephus, and I just did a video not too long ago about that. And so after 70 AD, they were all either killed or dispersed, again, scattered amongst, the Gentiles. Now, the Jewish communities that continued, of course, rejected Jesus. The ones that didn't reject Jesus, those Jews that accepted Jesus, kind of were becoming Christian communities, and so they lost their Jewish identity. And the ones that continued the teachings of the Pharisees and Talmud, which was the interpretation of the law of Moses, which the Pharisees started, they kept calling themselves Jews. However, these little groups also mixed pretty much in their diaspora or their scattering, because they were sent all over. They had to hide. They were persecuted by the Romans. The Romans were not very happy with them even after they destroyed, Jerusalem and Palestine. They were not very happy because Jews were always rebellious people. They didn't want them to rebel again. So they were always persecuted. And they continued, however, a religion that was not according to really Moses and the prophets. Jesus said that clearly. They intermarried as well. Can you imagine? For the past 2,000 years, they mixed. Also, they couldn't keep record anymore of their genealogy. That totally, didn't exist. After 2,000 years, that's kind of hard anyways. So here we have the starting point of a totally different religion. They had to come up with a way how they're going to be saved. Can't use the Bible anymore because only God saves, so they may have to wait for a Messiah, and they're not waiting for Messiah. They think they are saved through good works. And on top of it, there's also a group of Jews that, of course, were converted Jews. And we call those today Khazar Jews. There was one country in the Turkey area who converted to Judaism, the whole country. And these people that converted to Judaism, of course, continued their own type of Judaism, right? And these people then again migrated up towards the north, towards Poland, even Ukraine, Russia, spread out that way. But they were not really descendants of Judah. If you look up Wikipedia, they're saying, oh no, they are from Judah. But even the Khazar Jews today know they're not from Judah, that they were converted Khazars. You had a lot of those, of course, in the eastern area of Europe. So now you have mixed group of people that call themselves Jews. Some of them are not really Jews, they were just converted a long time ago. And then you have some group that maybe can trace themselves back to Judah. Who knows? How can you do that even after 2,000 years? Just go back 2,000 years, right, to Jesus' time, when they still could. But 2,000 years, mixing. How are you going to do that? Think about in America, right? People came over from Germany and they mixed. Yeah, they can, after 250 years, they can trace them back and say, oh yeah, maybe my ancestors came from Germany or England or someplace, Italy. But a lot of them can't because they're mixed. Oh yeah, Italian after 250 years. But here we have 2,000 years. How many can trace themselves back really to Judah? They call themselves true Jews. Okay, they could trace them back to Benjamin, like Paul did. Paul said, I am a Benjaminite. He called himself a Jew too, because he came from the kingdom of Judah. But nevertheless, 10 tribes are gone. Doesn't exist anymore. So all these people, what do they have? How can they trace themselves back? How can they call themselves Jew? I can call myself Jew if I want to, if I practice Judaism. That's why a lot of Jews, so-called Jews, are saying, well, anybody who practiced Judaism is a Jew. And of course, there's a lot of people that don't totally practice Judaism. They're just going by the traditions and still call themselves Jew, just because they're traditionally related through their religion. And I think this is probably today the only way we can identify a Jew is through their religion. Just like there's Christians, there's Muslim. You can identify these people by their religion. And people under the U.S. Constitution, we are all protected as freedom of religion. We're all protected. It doesn't matter whether we're Jews, Christian, or Muslim. We should be protected. We should have freedom of religion. Nobody should be persecuted. But today we still have these people, okay, and especially because we are mixing so much other things like, oh, you are a Jew and because you're Jew, you have to support Israel. No, that is not the case anymore today, or not ever was. There's a lot of Jews practicing their religion that don't support Israel, that are not affiliated with Israel. They don't want to be affiliated with Israel. In other words, with the politics of Israel. Again, then we need to talk about, okay, how did this Israel come about? Did the Jews ask for this whole thing with Israel? I don't have to go politically. How did this Israel come about? And that's when we then need to talk about Zionism. Are all Jews Zionists? No, I wouldn't think so, because not all Jews are interested in having a state of Israel. So a lot of Jewish Orthodox people that don't believe in having a state. They don't believe that that state of Israel is from God. Why? Because they lost it anyways, and they know it. But we have so many dumb so-called Christians that think that Israel is from God. No, Israel, the state of Israel, is not from God. The Jews lost it. The Hebrews lost it. The kingdom of Israel lost it because they were committing adultery. They were worshiping idols. If you know the history, that you know, wait a minute, no. They don't get it anymore. Once you're divorced, you're divorced. No more turning back. I say that all the time. Under Moses, you can't go back. You can't remarry your wife anymore. And they lost it because they didn't follow God's commandments. And especially today, the rabbis don't follow God's commandments. They follow Talmud. That's an interpretation. That's their main core. The religion today of the Jews, Judaism, is following Talmud. They're studying Talmud. Why? Because they're following false teachers. They're deceived. And many of them are just name Jews. They follow traditions. Oh, they're following traditions now for generations after generations after generations. And that's what they follow. It doesn't matter. It's just a religion. And at one time, now we're going to go to the history. At one time, the governments of Europe, especially England, no, it didn't come from Germany. Who knows, maybe Jesuit, what else? Vatican interests try to get rid of the Jews in Europe. Why? Because they didn't want them. They didn't mingle with them. They couldn't control them as much as the other people. And so they thought, well, hey, if these people had their own state and we can send them all there, then we wouldn't have to deal with them. And that's when the Zionist movement started. Now, where did that Zionist movement come from? Well, the elites from Europe, let's say Europe, mainly maybe England, the Vatican, most likely, the Jesuits. And so they were planning, of course, if you go up the pyramid of power, you will end up where? You will end up with the Vatican and with Satan. Satan wanted to control them and again destroy them. Why? Because they brought forth Messiah. Even though they denied him and rejected him, but they still brought him forth. Yeah, so they were the bad God. I mean, Satan still has, still hates them because they brought forth Messiah. So now England tried to give them a country, Palestine. But there were already people there. Who was there? The Palestinians. People that maybe were surviving, of course, the Roman massacre in 70 AD, those Jews that intermarried with maybe Arabs or other groups of people, even became maybe Muslim eventually, or some kept their identity as Jews. It's what you had left during the Ottoman Empire. Most of them became Muslim because they had advantages. And then the English came in, First World War, and tried to, they did destroy the Ottoman Empire, the French and the British, mainly the British, because of their imperialistic tendency. And they just put the whole area down there into shambles. And since then, they all try, to gain back, independence and whatever. That's a mess down there. And in this whole mess, they put the Jews they used them in order to control the population down there. That's really what they did, people. Or to cleanse couldn't you say ethnic cleanse? Or just, hey, they wanted to control the population down there. And whose fault was that? Well, America and England. Because England destabilized the area because their merchants wanted to get, the oil down there, whatever. So that's another problem. Then they put the Jews down there, but there were already people there, but the Jews didn't tolerate anybody else. Oh no, can't tolerate the Muslims, we can't tolerate the Palestinian people. Remember, Palestinian people, some of them were actually Jewish, some of them were Christian, some of them are Christian, some of them are Muslim. Yeah, they created a mess, and that creates everything else. That's where Zionism started. Some groups of these Jews, radical Jews, were used to stir up, should I say S-H-I-T? That's what they did. Stir up things. All over the world. Stuff was stirred up, was used to start the wars, to bring down the Tsar. This whole thing with the revolution, the Russian Revolution, was all started, by Zionists. By Jews. You look at the leaders of the Bolshevik regime, they are Jewish. They used the Jews because the Tsar didn't like the Jews. He wanted to get rid of them too. Why? You know what? You can figure that one out too. Why did everybody in Europe try to get rid of the Jews? Well, because they didn't fit in. They always thought they were different and working against the system. So that's why they thought, well, if we get rid of them and put them in their own land, maybe it'll be all good. But you can't find a land that has no people anymore. Just didn't work. And so they started another mess. Did they know? Yes, they did know that they would start a mess. And then they had to stir up the Christians. Yes, my time is up. I know it's 40 minutes, but then they started up because they had to get support by people, right? So they stir up and brainwash and control and manipulate the Christian thinking and making them believe that, oh, yes, these Jews, whoever they are, right, have a right to go back to the promised land. And they even find Bible verses. Of course, these Bible verses are all misinterpreted because they all refer to a time when Messiah comes. Anytime the Jews or whoever, people of God, come back to the promised land is when Jesus is coming. In other words, the Messiah is establishing his kingdom. That's when the people of God will come back to the promised land, and not before. But no, it is easy to use the sheep and tell them stuff, again, lies that are not even true because they're not checking it out. So after I'm telling you the story or the history of the Jews, you tell me if the Jews, whoever that is, right, should have the Holy Land, and who are really Jews. Of course, the Christians should know better than any other group, because let's go to Romans 2. Romans 2, we know exactly what Paul said about who a Jew really is. We talked about, of course, now biological, religious, and even if you're affiliated with a country, no, these people are not Jew. Well, they are Jews, but they're either falling under religious Jews, which they are religious Jews. Some of them are not even religious because just their tradition, they're just following their tradition. But regardless, they cannot trace themselves back to Judah anymore. And because they're religious Jews, are they really Jews? Oh, anyways, makes it even harder. Because we're 2,000 years away from Paul. But even if you're Christian, you should know Romans 2 and Galatians. I'm reading Romans 2 today. A person is not a Jew who is one only outwardly, nor is circumcision merely outwardly and physical. So now he is saying everybody who's circumcised is a Jew, because Jews circumcise. Nowadays, even Christians circumcised. But in those days, the Gentiles didn't circumcise, only the Jews did. No, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is circumcision of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the written code. Such a person's praise is not from other people, but from God. So Paul here is telling you very clearly that there is a spiritual Jew. Of course, a spiritual Israel too. And he talks about that too. The true Israel of God. You can look that up. Do a study. Who is the true Israel of God? It's not the ones that are biologically descendant of Israel, but the ones that are spiritual descendants. true believers. And here he is saying it again over and over again. And these fake Christians, how many? 95% of fake Christians, dispensationalists. Okay, look under playlist dispensationalism. They don't know what a true Jew is. And who should really inherit the promised land? Well, do we, the true believers, supposed to inherit? Yes, we are. But we're going to have to wait for the Messiah to come. Once Messiah comes, then we who are true Jews will inherit the land. What does that mean? Somebody is going to destroy whatever is existing there now. Jesus will. That's why we're going to have the Armageddon War in Revelation 16. So what does the Jew have over the Gentile? Nothing. If you go to now Romans 3, you will hear that. That's what Paul then says. Nothing. The only advantage they have is because they really have the oracle. He says because they have the oracle of God, another the word of God, and mostly that they brought forth Messiah. That's what they have more over everybody else. They were bringing forth Messiah who would save the whole world. But they rejected him. So what do they have? Nothing. They have nothing over other people, over the Gentiles. Nothing. And he continues in chapter 3 saying that we're all sinners. We're all wretched and lost. And I think I talked about that in my last video. People, I'm coming to an end. I'm already over my time. Long video, but people, this is something we need to know as Christians. I know my videos don't go out there. Who knows why? Algorithm, of course. That's why please give me a thumbs up, comment. Please comment, say something. What do you think about this? I know people don't want to say anything about anti-Semitism, Jewish, whatever. And people, I do not take any remarks. I will erase remarks that are going against the Jews in general or hate speech against the Jews, because I don't need that. Something I don't need. Or stereotypical stuff. You know, the Jews are taking over the world or something like that. Because they're not. People, the Jews are not the ones taking over the world. The Vatican has always had everything under control, not the Jews. The Jews are just being used. Okay? Just clear. Please, if you made it to the end of this video, no. Don't want to hear it. All right, coming to an end. Let the Holy Spirit guide you always.